Both rumors surrounding Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 have been confirmed. A bisexual Henry option and an African character named Musa. And the result? 2 weeks before launch, nobody's talking about the gameplay or the story. Just whether KCD2 is woke or why being woke is fine. This is not how fans, myself included, wanted things to go, but Warhorse made their choices, and now they're facing the backlash. It's likely we're seeing a case of tasteful representation, at least by today's standards, but so many gamers are just fed up with this entire topic that it doesn't really matter. Maybe if Warhorse had kept an eye on the political shifts in the Western world recently, they might have seen this coming. After all, it's not like people just woke up one day tired of forced representation. There's a lot to unpack here, so welcome to Toasty Gaming, where today we're breaking down why Warhorse has managed to alienate so many fans, and what this could mean for the future of KCD2. The first and most obvious question, are these changes even an issue? After all, Henry's bisexuality is optional. You're not forced to make him gay, and yeah, that's true. A few years ago I might have even agreed with that point, but for a lot of people this has become a matter of principle. Just look at Dragon Age. It started with optional same-sex romances, and nobody cared at first. But then BioWare shoved the entire far-left socio-cultural gender studies agenda down our throats with Dragon Age Failguard. I get it, many people feel that giving these topics any space suddenly means you're being pushed to the margins yourself. This sentiment is backed up by various surveys, making it an undeniable empirical fact, whether you like it or not. Personally, I don't care that much about Henry having a gay romance option, because I personally deal with far-left progressive environments daily, but I completely understand anyone who is annoyed by Henry's sudden bisexuality. Let's not forget, Henry was canonically straight in the first game. For God's sake, the first scene of the game has him literally ogling Theresa's ass, and now he's suddenly bisexual? There's no narrative justification for this, no way this enriches the story or adds depth to his character. The entire game takes place about 2 months after the raid on Skalitz. It's not like there was this much space for him to change sexual orientation. The only seeming reason for this change is to pander to what's often called the wider audience or the modern audience. And who exactly is this modern audience? Loud, far-left socio-cultural activists online, a small minority in democratic elections but somehow dominating these conversations as if they represent the endless masses. Even if Henry's gay romance is done tastefully, people will still be slightly angry because it feels like a tiny, irrelevant minority hijacked the project for the majority. This isn't anecdotal. Recent surveys show a decline in public support for LGBTQ+ rights. A 2024 GLAAD report noted a decrease in support for LGBTQ equality, reflecting growing tensions over how these issues are being presented. This decline is often attributed to perceptions of overreach, people feeling these topics are being pushed to them in ways that feel forced and unwelcome. When a beloved character like Henry has this established trait of him being straight changed without a narrative justification that feels fulfilling, it taps into the same frustration that has led to the falling support for LGBTQ+ themes. People aren't rejecting the change just for the sake of rejecting it. They're reacting to what they perceive as a broader agenda being pushed into spaces they value, like video games, and this helps explain why the introduction of a bisexual Henry has sparked such strong reactions among fans. It's no surprise that people so strongly react to Henry suddenly being turned bi, especially considering Warhorse's previous stance on DEI in video games. Daniel Vavra, for example, one of the game's co-creators, famously tweeted in 2017 that there were no black people in medieval Bohemia. Fast forward to KCD2 and we suddenly have not just any African character, but a Malian physician who ended up in the Ottoman Empire before finding his way into Bohemia. Has history changed over the past few years? Or have the sentiments of a certain developer? The addition of Musa from Mali isn't the end of the world, just like the bisexual Henry isn't going to ruin the game, but Musa's inclusion is immersion-breaking and anachronistic. Historical records show no evidence of Africans in Central Europe at this time. In my hometown of Vienna, where the town archives and trade records from the 1400s are very extensive, there's no mention of African traders or dignitaries. Now, sure, Warhorse argues that Musa served Sigismund after working in Sultan Bayezid's court, but let's not forget the context here. Sigismund was in the thick of a brutal, years-long fight against the Ottoman Empire that basically spanned his entire life. The Battle of Nicopolis, which is frequently referred to in the first game, was a bloody and devastating defeat where the Ottoman forces not only annihilated the Christian army, but also slaughtered thousands of prisoners. And you know who was in charge of that defeated army? Sigismund. And you know who led the Ottoman forces that butchered those prisoners after humiliating them? Sultan Bayezid. So now Warhorse wants us to believe that Sigismund, the man who fought against Bayezid's forces with everything he had, would welcome into his service a physician from that very same court. I guess Warhorse considers war crimes to be nothing more than friendly cultural exchanges. Do you think Musa joined Sigismund's court after he witnessed the murder of his friends, or before he witnessed the murder of his friends, or maybe sometime in between? I'm sure Sigismund would have been just thrilled to accept a former Ottoman court member into his ranks, especially after Bayezid's forces tried to mount his head on a spike and left his comrades dead in the dirt. And as for the Bohemians, I'm sure they were absolutely delighted to see a Muslim physician in the service of the very same man who had just slaughtered their fathers, brothers, and husbands a few years prior. But sure, Warhorse, I guess this is the epitome of historical accuracy, right? And of course, Musa's from Mali, a land that's so isolated that even the Muslim world once thought its gold-grown fields rather than being mined, and many people didn't even consider the inhabitants of Mali to be human, but rather mythical creatures. Warhorse must have borrowed a historian from Ubisoft to back this one up, because that's all that history is about, right? Representation. It's not like the subject of history used to be about showing us who we were in the past, of providing us an image of where we come from so we can make comparisons with the present and form ideas for where we might go in the future. No, history is obviously all about following the current zeitgeist, and if the zeitgeist demands representation, there shall be representation in history. It doesn't matter that this isn't backed up by any sources, or that this is basically more or less made-up voodoo history. It's not like it could be maybe potentially corrosive to our society in the long term, that the science that once used to be our reference point for the present is now being diluted into something almost unrecognizable. Of course, rewriting history for short-term goals and short-sighted reasons isn't Warhorse's invention. I just always hoped that they were a company that's better than this. Nonetheless, despite these questionable changes, game design-wise, KSD2 still looks amazing. I'm disappointed by the forced representation, but let's keep some perspective. I'll cancel my pre-order, wait to see how things develop, and take a breather. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 sales might be slightly struggling now, but if the game turns out as good as expected, it will bounce back with no issue. And any anti-pandering or DEI campaigns will just look downright ridiculous and stupid. At the end of the day, though, it's not the additions themselves that bother me, it's how Warhorse handled them. They clearly knew these changes would stir up controversy, so they kept them under wraps until it was far too late to backtrack. They were smart enough to understand that these decisions would ruffle feathers, but they pushed them out anyway. It's a subtle move, a way to avoid the heat but still push forward with their agenda. Other studios flaunt their progressive additions proudly patting themselves on the back for checking the boxes. Warhorse, however, goes all shy, hiding behind a veil of "we didn't mean to offend." It makes you wonder why, doesn't it? In the end, I'm still hoping Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 lives up to the hype. I'll be cautious, I'll wait, and I'll see what happens when the dust settles. I'm just disappointed that the studio I've had faith in took such a strange approach. We don't need pandering or forced diversity for a game to succeed. We need consistency, immersion, and most of all, respect for the history it claims to represent. And despite these weird additions, KSD2 might just tick those boxes for a good game. So here's to hoping Warhorse proves me wrong. I'm not jumping to conclusions just yet, but I won't be handing over my pre-order money until I see whether they stick the landing or just slide into the trap many other studios have fallen into. So what do you think? Are we just overreacting to a few changes, or is Warhorse going down a treacherous path? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give a thumbs up, and if you want more content like this, hit the subscribe button. And of course, stay toasty, my friends. Until next time, cheers.